Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today, we are talking with the CEO of Team Mpowered Fitness, who lives in Orlando, Florida, and grew up as a ballet dancer with the Orlando Ballet until age 15, which was when she started weight training and wakeboarding, actually, until a really bad accident occurred. And maybe we'll talk about that as well today. But she attended the University of Florida and began training clients. Soon then she started a battle with an eating disorder, going from 145 pounds to 90 pounds, losing her hair, her cycle, friends, and her identity. When she graduated, she moved home and was put on a slew of medications with a variety of side effects, and that really put her internal health at the top of mind. So she then started studying nursing as well as functional medicine, and during this time, hired a bodybuilding coach who coached her for free and put her on stage so that she could be told, you need to gain weight and do what needs to be done to do so. This athlete earned her pro card when she won the overall at her 9th show ever. Now, 4 years later, she is healthy, thriving, and growing her own functional prep and lifestyle coaching business without taking any medications or having any health issues. And she uses the knowledge she has gained to empower, inspire, and cultivate healing and growth in other women. If you guys are listening to this, we're also doing this on YouTube at celestial_fit if you want to watch us talk and have fun today. So welcome to the show, MADDY Michelsen. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here too. It's just so cool that we literally met a few days ago in person. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we are literally talking this week. And that was so special. It's nice to meet women in the industry, but it's especially nice when I already have gotten to meet you before we do these two. It's
For
cool.
sure. Yeah, that was perfect timing for us.
Yeah. So, I have to ask, what is something you do or think about or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
Oh, I've seen you ask this question and I should have prepared myself.
It's literally
So
the only question aside from advice that people can prepare for, but I don't blame you for not preparing for it.
yeah, I actually have like two things that I do. So one is more immediate, the other is not. But my mom and I, my mom is really big into like energy. And so the second that I actually go backstage with my like rice cakes and my pump up bands and things, like I turn into a different human. If you guys have met me or seen me, like anytime around the hotel, I try to be as like bubbly and enthusiastic and as Maddie as possible. And like I get backstage and I'm like we call it my bubble. And literally people will come up to me and my mom will be there and I won't even hear them. And my mom is like, she's in her bubble. And I do this thing where I just like get into my space. I don't look at other people. I don't really like conversate because I find that a lot of conversations backstage have to do with nerves and I feed off of that. So I really just get into my own space. And then immediately before I go on stage, I have a background in dancing, but it wasn't hip hop. But let me tell you, the best way to warm up, sometimes I'll even like drop my pump up bands. I will just dance because they're always playing music. And usually it's like old school Black Eyed Peas, old school Lil Wayne, like it's fun stuff. So I always dance before I go on stage.
That's so interesting. So there's like this bubble that you exist in, and then you break out of it and you start dancing.
Right before I go on stage. Yeah, well, think about it. Like if you're dancing, like you're like, one of those you're smiling, people are looking at you, maybe someone's laughing and that makes you laugh. So it automatically puts you into this like kid-like carefree, not worried about other people judging you, which is essentially what you're going on stage to do, spirit. And so that's the exact kind of MO that you want to give off on stage.
Wow. Have you always done that, or did this come in time?
Um, Honestly, I don't think that I automatically always did that um subconsciously. Now it's more subconscious for me. But if you think about it, having been a dancer for so many years, I've never actually had that question asked to me, but it's very likely that I probably did used to do that backstage, maybe practicing the movements that I was about to go do on stage, but probably did that more consciously, just to prepare to go on stage. And in a way, it probably eliminated some of those fears.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, you were not just any dancer, you were the youngest professional dancer on the Orlando Ballet at 14 years old.
Yeah.
So, I imagine your peers were not, as relatable either.
Well, my peers were all, that's like kind of the funny thing. I don't have many friends. I shouldn't say any, but I don't have many friends that are my age. I have a sister who's 7 years older. Growing up, I was always friends with her friends, and doing this style of dance that we actually had partners, which were male and female couples who would do your lifts and things like that. But my male partners were always like in their 30s, um, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but they were always very feminine men for the most part. But um, yeah, I mean, none of my friends have ever been my age. So certainly intimidating to some degree, when you're 14.
Yeah, it's very interesting to be put in those environments at a young age, but clearly you thrived. And I got this sense that you've always been someone who's hopped into something or committed to something and done well because you fully invest yourself in it. I know that after ballet, you started wakeboarding, you started weight training. What happened with wakeboarding? Walk us through that athletic side of you and how that ended.
Yeah. So, kind of a little bit of a backstory into how I got into wakeboarding. I had actually tried and attempted every single sport under the sun: swimming, lacrosse, flag football, track, cross country. And I wasn't really great at them because, as you can imagine, I was very graceful with the lacrosse stick. I would like punch it. And I also had like a depth perception issue. I have a very bad stigmatism, so I couldn't catch a football. So I went to water sports from ballet, and I am very much, it served me well. And we could probably talk about this a little bit too. It served me well that I am very much the persona or the personality that goes all in, and my whole life has to revolve around something that I'm doing. And so whether that's my business or whether that is bodybuilding or wakeboarding, it was wakeboarding at the time. The injury was the catalyst that took me down a different path. And I believe that every single thing that happens to you in this life, good and bad, is purposeful and intentional. And it's up to us. I call these our little micro tests. They're going to present themselves all throughout your life until you're ready to pass it. And the tests only get bigger. And my little test was like trying to reroute me onto this path, which the river is just seemingly flowing down. But the accident was, I was just fatigued. I was actually coming onto the shoreline after riding. I was out at Disney. My mom was a executive at Disney at the time, and they weren't making me wear a helmet. So she wasn't going to sue her, the hand that was feeding her. But the board slipped, hit my head. I have soft spots on my head. So I'm very prone to like concussions, head injuries, minor fracture and a concussion. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to hang up my wakeboard, and sort of dove into the gym more from there.
How long were you wakeboarding before that happened?
I mean, that day we were out all day, but probably 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you went from trying out a bunch of different sports. You were a dancer and then you got onto the water sports, and that's a tragedy really to go through that because obviously it's made you more vulnerable. You said today are more susceptible to things today. But
Yeah.
weight training and bodybuilding is such a safe sport when it comes to that kind of stuff. No,
Yeah.
I've never been hit in the head by anything other than a cable attachment, you know? So
Which don't downplay that. Those things hurt.
they hurt. They do.
Yeah.
Or like when you're in a smaller gym and you like stand up and you hit the handle of a machine. I've done that too, but
Uh-huh. Or like a plate. Ooh.
yeah. See, but at least it's less likely than
It is.
yeah, like
It is.
paintball and soccer.
But I also like to think a lot of people who have watched my channel and whatnot know that like my mom is like my person. She really is. The irony is my mom was never a dancer. My sister was. But my mom was a pro water skier and then shortly thereafter became really immersed into homeopathy and natural medicine. So that's kind of, I've always grown up in this like functional space. It was kind of like a second language that we spoke in my household. So I knew what macros were at a young age. I knew what like liver detoxification and what DIM did at the age of 6. Like I had this like knowledge from her. And so she ended up becoming a functional nutritionist and she wrote a book. And at that very same time, she was engaged to, my dad is not, but engaged to Mr. Florida, the bodybuilder. And so my mom was weight training and bodybuilding before bikini was even a thing. It was just female bodybuilders. And so I guess I've kind of followed her trajectory. I mean, pro water skier to bodybuilder, it just looks a little
Yeah.
bit different in today's day and age.
That's so cute. Is she still into the sport of bodybuilding?
You know, it's really funny because in talking a little bit about my story, you alluded to it in my intro about how my former coach had gotten me up on stage and kind of expanding upon that a little bit. The reasoning was I respect people of authority, right? So I was never necessarily gonna, I think, fully grasp, although I trusted him, I was never going to fully grasp onto his advice, which was like, you need to put on some size. I needed to hear it from like the judge. So of course the judge told me, you know, you've got a great stage presence, but you're significantly underweight. Take time off.
Who was the
And
judge? Do you remember?
don't remember, but I was actually going back at like 11 p.m. to get my exercise bands. And he's like, I wasn't even going for feedback. He's like, you have your bikini on? He's like, yeah, take your robe off. And I took my robe off. And he was like, that right there. He's like, that's what we call an elephant ear butt cheek. And it's like when it caves in. And he was like, you need to put on size. And so I harnessed that. That was kind of the catalyst to like, okay, I've got my mission now. That is my mission. And I totally diverted there. You had asked me a question
If your
about
mom's still into the sport.
is my mom. Yes. So after that, my mom was like, oh gosh, because she was the one who said, you know, we've taken you now to psychologists and psychiatrists. No one could help me with my eating disorder because it was not from me feeling like I was fat or I was skinny. It was literally a control thing. I just took out and manifested my control issues on eating and training. And so at first, my mom was very much like, uh-oh, we just opened a can of worms. This was initially just supposed to be someone that Maddie trusted and could relinquish her control to and get healthy. And now she wants to do this competing thing.
Right.
But I think I've made it a priority to make my family very well versed, very informed. I'm not that daughter or that family member that's like, oh, everything's great about the sport. I'm gonna go do my cardio. Talk to you know, like they know the good, the bad. And I bring them into the journey with me. And as my mom has sort of seen not only my development physically, but also I think mentally, I mean, she's so bought in. She knows the judging criteria now. I mean, she could practically backfill one of the judges, I feel like.
That's awesome. How
Yeah.
cute. I think there's a lot of things that you just said I want to expand on with you. So,
Sure.
first of all, your mom being so supportive but of course, at first, a little bit nervous and weary about it. Second thing I'd want to get into with you is about your coach who put you on stage at that zone and in that way. Kudos to them. I'm gonna say that I remember seeing your stage shot back in 2020, and I was like, what? I was like, if this is what they give a placing to, I'm screwed. And I'm just being totally candid with you because that is what I thought. And I was like, I think that her coach like needs to have a conversation with her. I think she's not, I think she's sick.
Yeah.
And then now, but when I now learned your story over time, I realized like that coach was awesome for doing that because although it might have reflected poorly on him, he knew what you needed. And that actually speaks way more about his character and commitment, or I shouldn't say his, I'm not trying to say who your coach was, but like it's up to you if you share that. But that speaks more to their character than it does anything else. And I was like, I respect that a lot. And you've grown so much. I honestly didn't even know it was still you until then there was a transformation photo and I was like, oh, that's that girl. Like, that's crazy. That's so amazing. And I imagine putting your focus and control into bodybuilding. Some would say that's like disordered in itself. But what's interesting to me as a mental health professional is you were never actually diagnosed or maybe supported through that diagnosis because it wasn't coming from I want to change my body. And that's sad to hear because well, it's actually probably a good thing too, because honestly, if you had been, you probably would have gone through a treatment route that would not have been as
Well, that's
impactful.
just it. I was
Yep,
very much rebelling against the treatment that they were trying to give me because it didn't align with, I didn't want to go eat a burger and a milkshake. I
exactly.
still wanted to train. I still wanted to feed my body. It was just a matter of feeding my body more and training less. But you touched on so many things there. And one of the things that I feel so passionate about, and I would love if I could just speak on it for a minute,
Of
is
course.
you had said how a lot of people can perceive bodybuilding as being the thing that sort of is the catalyst to disordered eating and disordered behaviors. And I want to also say that I am the first person that also believes that to be true in many ways. Um, Now, there's a caveat to that. I did learn a lot of things from bodybuilding. I make this sound like I'm leaving the sport. I'm not leaving, but I did learn a lot of valuable things from bodybuilding. First and foremost, my coach started making me track my weight every day out of the week. And what that did was it really, really normalized that scale number. Because when you're only tracking your weight one day a week for your coach, it's like, what if you didn't poop that much? What if you stayed up and ate late that your trained legs the day before? Like that one number has so much more weight and gravity. So I started to learn these tools, like this little self check that I do every day, even to this day before I step on the scale. Because I also recognize that while I am healed from my disorder, you're never truly healed, right? Like I like to just say I'm in remission. And so I still need to make sure that I have these safeguards in place for myself. And one of those things is checking in with myself as an athlete, as a person, as Maddie, and how I perceive my progress and how do I feel before I even step on that scale. So the first thing was normalizing the scale. Bodybuilding taught me a tremendous amount about that. The coach that I was with at the time, now this did not serve me at one point, but while I was with him and healing from this, he helped me to see macros as like almost the if it fit your macros approach. I'm not a big fan of that for many reasons. I'm a big fan of my clients and athletes fitting their macros, but doing so with autonomy and informed in education around what really truly we want to be having in the diet. Now, with that being said, while I was healing, the if it fits your macros loosey goosey approach served me well because I could fit in a Pop Tart. I could fit in a sugar cookie. In fact, that week leading up to that show, my very first show, because he put me on stage 7 days after signing on with him, I was eating 3, 4, 5 sugar cookies a day. knew nothing about the quality of food, but it immediately normalized for me that a carb is a carb, a fat is a fat, and it's not, but I needed that to heal my relationship with food, to get over good foods versus bad foods. And of course, in time with more education, that got better. Now, I'm still talking.
You're
Stop
good.
me whenever you want. With that being said, recently, I would say in the last 6 or so months, I started having this new evolution internally where I was like, wow, bodybuilding taught me so much about, like, if you asked me how many calories I was eating today, I wouldn't even know. All I know is the macros. I'm
Right.
so removed from calories, I don't even care. But I started to realize how tracking was actually like I had advanced beyond that, if that makes sense. Like I was like, oh my gosh, now I feel like tracking is almost creating this disordered behavior. And it helped me to realize that I had truly healed from my eating disorder. I was like, wow, now I'm seeing how disorders can come from this because I'm feeling wrapped up in it. I'm feeling deprived and nervous about going into Christmas and going into New Year's with 800 flex calories and room to certainly add in more fun things, but still feeling like that's going to take me away from my family. And so I was like, Maddie, instead of shutting down, instead of rebelling, instead of following orders like you think you should be doing, this requires you to step up, to communicate with your coaches, and to tell them what you need. And in voicing to them what I needed, I was actually affirming for myself what I already knew, which is Jamie, Greg, I actually trust myself. And so I need you guys to remove these flex calories. And I need you to bear in mind, we were in prep. I said, I need you to remove these flex calories. And I need 2 full untracked days, Christmas Eve and New Year's Day. I said, I trust myself. I'm not going to go balls to the wall. I'm not going to eat like an asshole, but I need that for myself. And sure enough, I I actually did end up, shame on me, I did end up retroactively tracking. So when I got home after I finished all my meals, I went in and plugged things in and I was nearly spot on with my macros. And it was just this like moment where I was like, okay, that was how you strike that balance. That was where you pointed out how if you didn't voice your concerns, this could have become toxic. And for that same reason, like my athletes too, they get completely untracked meals. They get that flexibility. They get vacations where maybe they're just taking pictures of their food instead of actually putting it into a tracking app. Because I'm cognizant and aware that there's a good side and a bad side to everything, including the sport.
I appreciate you sharing both of those perspectives and experiences from what you've been through. And I think that what matters is intention. And even when I was speaking at the women's workshop, this topic came up about the scale, and then the topic came up about food. And the scale, I always recommend people consider other things outside of the number. So I love to hear that you have some sort of check-in system with yourself where you're looking at other things that you're proud of yourself for, or you're recognizing. And then the other thing is too, macros, that came up in discussion, and I was like, macros aren't the solution for disordered eating. Neither is a meal plan.
Right.
What makes something a problem is when it becomes an obsession, a fixation, and it takes away from your life. When it actually makes things more difficult in your life, that's when we need to be worried about it. Macros can be just as damaging, if sometimes not more damaging than a meal plan, because you do become so obsessed with the numbers that everything you look at is a number, and then you think I can never have something imperfectly unless it's that way.
Yeah.
But the same can be true for a meal plan. Like you said, the good versus bad food mentality can come of it.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that's why I'm like, it's so much more than food. Like when people come to me for the food relationship program, I'm like, they're like, well, do you care what I'm like? Should I be eating something? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm just going to think about why you're eating what you're eating. We're going to be focusing on those things because I think intention is more key than anything. And then you made the last point, which is when you recognize these red flags coming up, you came up with something to prevent them from actually being a problem. that's a big deal because other people might be too afraid to have the courage to say, hey, this isn't going to work for me. Maybe the 800 flex calories works for somebody else, but for me, like I trust myself enough, and I actually think that's making it harder. That it's similar to like if I have someone telling me I need to have a refeed meal every week versus I can just know that it's fine if I do, it's fine if I don't. I'm more likely to be happier in the it's fine if I do, it's fine if I don't camp, especially in an improvement season. So I think when you can advocate for yourself and you know it works for you, when you give yourself the freedom to choose, you're more likely to choose what's best for you.
For sure. And I think that that goes, with some barriers, right? Like sometimes we do think that we know what's best for us. And if you're not willing and open to understand the rationale behind your coach's protocol, which they should always be able to provide sound logic and rationale for, if you're not able to at least hear them out, which I did. Like I first asked, and I didn't include that, but I did first ask them, like, what was the intention behind the flex calories? And the intention actually wasn't to place a barrier or a constraint on me or to keep me in a box. But the intention behind those flex calories was actually to provide me with more flexibility. So, in that context, my goal was the same as theirs. It was to have more flexibility. So, when I feel discomfort as an athlete, I always press into that discomfort. And I do this in not just my athletic career, but in my whole life. If I'm dating a guy and I feel uncomfortable or some type of way about it, I continue forking away at that because usually there's something there. And in this case, it's not always bad. Like my realization, it it wasn't scary. It was that I was actually coming to this beautiful, you know, new tier where I could trust myself without the barriers of a macro. And you also touched on something too, and I want to go back to the scale because I actually had a client today check in with me, and she had talked about how, she had had some drinks this past weekend. Her boyfriend took her out on a surprise trip. She went and had wine and cheese and crackers, and then she went to a birthday party, and she said that she had tortilla chips and pork. And she's like, I'm sure they were salty. The scale's up. It's my fault. All these things. And I've worked with the coach that has been very much like, yep, it is your fault. Maybe next time you're going to button things back up. You would have been more accurate and diligent with tracking the wine and tracking the cheese. And within reason, it's like she's not in a prep. She's in the middle of her off season. And so I don't think she really expected this from me, but I sent her a whole video back about like, listen, you were more than X name, the athlete this weekend. You were the girlfriend. You were the best friend. And those are the identities. And I've talked about this in a few podcasts and on my channel. Those are the identities that take a back seat when we get, just like I have, so fixated on just being the bodybuilder. And if that means that the scale goes up or down a little bit, when you're checking in with yourself before you step on that scale, you're thinking about how filled your cup is because you spent time with the very people that are going to carry you through the season of when you're going to have to be X name only the bodybuilder. So who cares if the scale is up 2 pounds due to water retention, right? Because the identities that you were able to pour into this weekend, way more valuable than having a stabilized weight. So that's why we check in with ourselves. And in the same vein, like what if you had a ton of alcohol and then the scale goes down? That's not even an equivalent, like that. It's not a reward for good behavior. You just drank a bunch of alcohol. You're dehydrated. So sometimes the math just doesn't math either.
Yep, that's right. If you get too fixated on the number, you'll be so happy when it goes down and so upset when it goes up, but you forget about the process that led to that or the reasoning. Like,
Sure.
if you're not happy with the efforts you're making, you're going to have a less positive response to whatever that result is. And I think the unfortunate thing is, and you experience this with your eating disorder, but you'll get positive reinforcement for what people see on the surface. And then they're not actually thinking about what's leading to that positive result. So, like,
Uh,
then you get rewarded for a negative
this is
process.
this is huge. I mean, that's actually kind of the thing that furthered my eating disorder was I was a thicker girl going into college. I definitely had a lot of meat. I looked good, but I had a lot of thickums on me. And when I first started losing weight, it was a healthy. My pediatrician had even commented on it that I was getting healthier. And other girls in my sorority were making kind comments, and I truly did look good. I really, really did. And then it just got taken too far. In the same vein, as coaches, this is why we don't necessarily want to only focus on the athlete's physique. Like when I check in with my athletes, I do this really, really weird um, strategy, and I will read through their check in once as them. I'll go get coffee or a drink, or I'll read another check in and I'll come back to it and read it as the coach. And the reason why I read it as them first is, like I said, it's more for that. I want to be immersed in their brain, in their multifaceted persona that's more than just the athlete with the physique goal. Because as coaches, it's very, very easy. I've worked with them before where it's very much like, well, you look a little inflamed this week. The scale did go up. So we're going to add 30 minutes of cardio. We're going to drop 20 grams of carbs. And it's like everything that went on that week, even though I talked about it, was just like I was moving. I had low sleep. My boyfriend broke up with me. I didn't poop for 2 days. Like, doesn't warrant these like slap on the back of the wrist punishments.
Exactly.
And then as an athlete, you're wiring your brain given that feedback because it's so coach coach client. um you're immediately like placing so much weight and value on scale numbers, on uh scale goes up, I need to cut food. Scale goes up, I need to move more. Scale goes down, I can eat, I can be a little bit more loosey goosey with my tracking. Scale goes down, I can cut 10 minutes off my cardio. Like, it's not that easy. And so as coaches, we have to be so cognizant, and that's something that I love about my new coaches, of honoring and placing even more value on the emotional side of things.
Yeah, if you're working with a coach who's only focused on your physique, well, hold on, how do I want to phrase this? Because some coaches will, that is their focus, right? Obviously, you're hiring them to get you to a physique. But as an athlete, you also have to recognize, like, just because that's their focus, if you did hire them for that, doesn't mean that should be your only focus. So if someone is working with a coach who's strictly focused on their physique and they did hire them for that, I think then that athlete has to decide, do I want a coach who only focuses on physique, or am I able to report variables consistently enough? Because the other thing too is not every athlete knows to report those variables about moving, breakups, bowel movements, stress in life, that the coach only focuses on it. But you're right, there are some though who want to capitalize on how far can I take this person, and even for the promotion of their own business potentially above promoting the athlete's overall well-being. And I've had clients who come to me and they're like, oh, well, I'm worried about telling my coach about this because they're just going to cut my macros. And I'm like, you mean to tell me that when you go through this, your coach is like punishing you? What the heck?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And so, you actually brought up a key word here, which is beyond the goals of physique and the identity there. So you have talked about in other platforms that you lost yourself, like you lost your identity when you had the eating disorder. So now let's fast forward to where we are now. You're 4 years removed from not really knowing yourself or losing that identity. So how do you identify yourself now? Like who really are you then?
Ooh, that's so good. I think like a lot of this does go back to I will never, and this goes back to my personality, which is I will dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. And one of my thematic words, if you will, ever since I got this pro card, because I had a lot of things up in the air. Do I go back to school and continue more education? I was thinking about literally doing that. Do I continue coaching and really dive in full force, investing in this business, acquiring an assistant coach? Do I stop competing? Right? Like, I really didn't know what was next for me. And I just chose to not be decisive and to go where the river flowed.
Hmm.
And this does relate to my identity, but I really was, I, as you can see, based on what I'm saying right now, I was at this spot where my identity for a while had been basically just bodybuilder. In the past year and a half that I was in prep without a pause, I truly was isolated, bodybuilder only. I mean, I hung out with maybe 5 friends all year long. And not on multiple occasions, like truly spent an hour with 5 friends all year. And I was so isolated. Even my family was like, Maddie, you can't even come to an event without having a conversation about anything other than food or lifting or your show. And so in the period of taking, starting with new coaches and whatnot, I had to cultivate that identity. And I had to also not necessarily put pressure on identifying what that new identity was. And in not doing that, and instead in going where the river flowed, I think I'm more pointed in an identity now than I ever have been. And my identity is now very much, sure, rooted into bodybuilding, but truly rooted in being a an ambassador of this sport, and being as healthy inside and out, mentally, physically, hormonally, um emotionally, than I've ever been. And it's been a byproduct of many things. It's been a byproduct of, my coaches really pushing me outside of my comfort zone to connect with other women in this sport, and me getting on many platforms and meeting so many incredible women. I was just in the wrong circle. It's been a byproduct of me saying, you know what, I'm this functional health coach, but I never really invested in my own functional health, so let me start getting some answers. And this is all stuff that's happened in the past, 2 years. And so, but let me start actually looking into my own health and wrestling with that. It's been a byproduct of me setting boundaries with work and investing in quiet time. And truly, like I said, being an ambassador of this sport is showing and embodying what it means to be healthy on all levels. And so that's really where my new identity is.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into all the details of what we talked about before we hit record, but like you represent yourself in that way. And I think you promote yourself and the sport so positively that it's not you can tell you're not clearly defined by one thing. So you're clearly passionate, you're clearly committed, you're clearly driven. Those are all great qualities and traits of you, but it's awesome that you freed yourself from an over attachment to something like a disordered eating pattern or like bodybuilding and
Yeah.
isolation, and you
Well,
found
and I had to forgive myself too from attaching. I think that's such a huge thing. I think that so often, not only as athletes, but as men and women, it doesn't matter who you are, we fail to forgive ourselves for the areas where we may have fallen short. And like, mic drop, right? Like, I had anchored myself into being this like by the book bodybuilder for so long, um that in order to get to a place of true forgiveness, I think I first had to explore why I did that. And the reason why I did that was because I actually had sort of coined the achievement in obtaining my pro card as being this like mark of me truly overcoming my eating disorder. So that's why I had to be so laser focused on that, because even though I had overcame the eating disorder, until I had that card in my hand, it wasn't official, right? Like, even though you may be a psych major, until you have your diploma, you may have graduated a year ago. You know, those diplomas take forever to get in the mail. You're not truly a graduate. And so that's kind of how I felt. And then it was once I got that pro card, I remember walking through this apartment door and thinking to myself, oh shit, why do I still want to compete now? And it was like, I got what I needed out of it. And so then I had to really explore for myself, forgive myself, because I've realized, oh, that's why you were so ingrained in it. And I don't regret being so ingrained in it, because I don't know that I would have made it this far that quickly had I not been that invested. But I now have that experience to be able to prevent my current athletes from going down that road when I see the behavior, because I was aware of it in myself. And I was also able to actually grapple and come to terms with the fact that I love competing. And like, I can honestly say with everything in me that I didn't love this sport until December.
Hmm.
I loved the grind because I thought I thrive. And this is a toxic trait. Everything in life doesn't need to be hard. And if it was hard, then I had perceived that as me thriving. So I loved the grind. But when I actually got on stage, I hated stage day. Absolutely hated it. But I had to keep going, because remember what this pro card symbolized for me. And then it was once I got on stage in December with a completely different perspective, completely different mindset, completely different support system, and a whole new, refreshed, just like no expectations, free, proud of myself, truly proud, and just excitement, that I was like, wait a second, I love this sport and I love what it stands for. And I love the opportunity that I have in this sport to, leverage the visibility that I've gotten, and to leverage this community that I've built, and to shed light on the beauty of this sport. And so that's kind of where the reshaping of my identity came this past December. I was kind of forced into it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like the pro card symbolized something that you were working towards to heal from and get relief from. And because of that pursuit, you were actually so laser focused on it that it took you actually getting to that point to realize, like, okay, there's more to this that I like. But you couldn't necessarily experience that because you were gripping so tightly to what it would give you or what it represented, that until you had it, nothing else mattered, because that was your symbol of success versus what was actually happening internally and within the community for you.
Yeah, it's so funny because I only did one show with these new coaches, which is when I
Mhm.
turned pro. It was their first prepping me.
Yeah.
And before that, like I said, I was, I had, I was with one of those very much coach client, things.
Yeah.
And I remember I really was so laser focused that one of the things, looking back retroactively now, that I had completely just like eliminated out of my vocabulary, eliminated out of my mindset, was gratitude. It
Mm.
was gratitude for the people around me who, even when I was ugly, even when I was not nice, when I was down, when I was shutting them out and not really giving those relationships any sort of miracle grow, if you will,
Mm.
um, they were still there for me. It was gratitude for them. It was gratitude for my own body and all that I was putting through it and being in alignment with my body. And I'm not trying to sound woo woo, but I truly wasn't giving back to my body at all. Like, I wasn't getting massages. I wasn't speaking kindly to my body. I was lean, super lean. In fact, too lean at one point in this last round of shows. And I would still look in the mirror and all I would see is that little lower belly pooch. And I would say the nastiest things to myself. And I remember once I got this pro card and I had kind of come down from the high, I remember just feeling like I have so many people to thank. Like it was like this overwhelming, like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And like, even when I walked into the gym, the people that only had one conversation with me for 5 minutes, when they were like, hey, congratulations, I was like, thank you. It wasn't thank you for the pro card. I went to thank them for the 5 minute conversation that they had with me that one Tuesday in prep when I didn't feel like being there. And I felt more than ever that it was like this gratitude that I had. It was like a win for everybody around me. It wasn't my win. It was my win as much as like the community of support that I had. Um, and everything changed. And I remember telling my mom after that show, she was like, is there any things that like, really hit you? And I said, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm so scared that I'm going to forget or somehow lose sight of the importance of being gracious, not only for coaches and for support and girlfriends in my body. And I don't know how to hold on to that reminder. I don't know how to continuously practice gratitude. And I'm afraid that, if I'm not in prep, I'm not going to have that. And I immediately ordered this gratitude journal online. I do it every single morning. It starts off my day, it bookends my day. I literally do it at the beginning and the end. And that was certainly kind of like a takeaway from this as well, was like, wow, I just completely forgot about being gracious on this journey.
Are there other habits you do year round that you don't even think about anymore, but that you think others would benefit from doing?
Habits. Um, mm, I mean, I would just say like two things overall. And we've already kind of talked about this. The first one is, not shutting out the people around you, big, big time. Like I've had those people that I have my absolute best friend in this world. He's a guy, he's a coach, he's a competitor, and we talk on the phone every single day for probably 3 or 4 hours. Um, we'll like I'll get in the bath and I'll put him on the side and we'll just talk and like, it's that was one of the relationships that in my I don't want to say last prep because I technically consider this two preps, like the one prep where I did like 10 shows this season and then the one prep where I did one show.
Right.
But all in the same period of time. But in that first prep, completely shut him out. And I will say, like, he's just one example, but I did that with a lot of people. So a daily practice is like make time for one intentional conversation each day.
Love that advice. That's
Yeah.
a really great perspective. And actually, now I'm kind of curious about your dating life because you did mention earlier that you isolated and that there were certain things you noticed
Yeah.
about yourself even through that you realize you do certain things or you say certain things. And I think as an athlete who we do tend to have the all or nothing type of thinking, or maybe we dig, dig, right? That can manifest in some maladaptive behaviors, but also some really great protective ones, right? Like our best aspects can also be some of our Achilles heels. So I'm
Absolutely.
curious, like how you manage, if you want to share this at all, like how you manage dating as a competitor.
Yes. Yes, I want to talk all about it. Okay.
Okay.
So I can I have so much to say about this. So yes, I had gotten on the phone with a therapist when my new coaches had proposed that I do a 7 to 8 week prep for nationals. And I was just like, I'm exhausted. I am burnout. I don't even know that I want to be a part of this sport anymore. And my therapist, she's actually like kind of an intuitive. My mom had sent her to me, and I was like, oh, great, here we go. And
Mhm.
she was like, here's the problem that you have. She was like, number one, you see females as competition, which I'll touch on here in a moment because I think that's a huge part of this sport and a huge
Yeah.
takeaway that I had from this like victory. And she said in number two, um, you have this like black and white identity. You have bodybuilder Maddie, and then you associate that with toughness, with being in the closet, um she said with being alone, with not being able to go out and eat, and then you have Fun Maddie. And Fun Maddie is dating. Fun Maddie, the guys that I was attracting when I was dating were going out, and we weren't just having like one or two drinks. It was like 5 and 6. Fun Maddie wakes up the next day and she skips a work. It was that type of stuff. And so I really didn't have this like happy medium. And so I started having conversations and watching more of not just like, I'm not downplaying, but not just like the people that were in my circle, like the NPC and like novice competitors, but I started just watching more of like the Olympians, the seasoned vets, if you will. And I was like, God, they're married. A lot of them have kids. A lot of them have full-time jobs out of this sport. And then they do 20 shows year round. I'm like, how do they do it? There's got to be a way. And so that's when the digging began. And I did not stop until I had a marriage of those two identities. And it's been a union of, many different things. Like I said, number one was getting clear on what I needed to achieve that. I knew that I had to put in a little bit more intentionality and attention with bringing a circle in, and a circle that was in alignment with my goals. So to be very transparent and truthful, my circle became a lot more bodybuilders. I had to also communicate at times with my coaches what I needed in order to facilitate that marriage. I needed untracked meals. I needed, X modifications to my training program. Like one of the things that I got very much like regimented with was like, I was on the same training program for like 16 weeks. And I was like, guys, I need a new training program. Like I need to have fun in the gym. I need to go and just be a kid. And they were like, what's wrong with your training? I'm like, nothing's wrong with it. It's me, but I need something new and exciting. So it's sometimes small things like that, but it's also, you know, making sure that you're doing things that are going to facilitate this union of identities, because it is possible to just be one person. It is possible to be a bodybuilder and to be a girlfriend and to be a friend. Now, with that being said, I really only like entertain new guys in the off season. I did like go on a date. Some guy DM'd me on Instagram in Texas after my competition, and he like flew here for New Year's, and he's a great person, don't get me wrong, but just not my person. And so yeah, that ended very quickly. We dated for I think 48 hours. Huh?
Was it a relationship or was it just
I mean, it was full on official for 48 hours. Yes, ma'am. But then I was like, oh gosh, you're back in Texas. I'm here and I don't want to do this.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that it is possible to date, but it's one of those things where it's like your belief that you can only be this fun person or this bodybuilder is also it's also attracting the guy that identifies with either this fun person or you're going to attract the bodybuilder. So you have to first marry those two identities for yourself so you can attract that same type of balanced person. Because that's what I was finding for myself was like, when I was in prep, I wanted to date a bodybuilder. But then when I wasn't in prep, I'm like, you're tracking your food. You don't drink at all. You don't like take rest days. Like you got to get on the Stairmaster every day. And then when I wasn't in prep, I was attracting these like party boys who would never, ever, ever understand. I was dreading the day that I would have to tell them, hey, I'm doing a prep, because I knew they couldn't relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also, like I said, it's no different than you can't love others when you don't love yourself. You're not going to be able to attract a guy who has what you're ultimately looking to cultivate in yourself unless it's cultivated.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to talk about the female competition thing.
Okay, can I comment on the dating thing? And then I
Yeah.
definitely want you to do that.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I think you're spot on with like that. extreme, like you're gonna attract the extreme of which maybe would best complement you. And then it's once you get happy with yourself in all the seasons and year round, you're able to see that you don't need no extreme could complement a grounded middle. And when you commit to the all or nothing thinking, it's predictable. That's why it's so attractive. It's like an extreme is attractive because we know what to expect. But
Mhm.
finding that middle ground, I love that your therapist really encouraged you to consider like how do you merge those identities, because I think that's the key to better longevity in athletes is to have something that they feel can add to their life no matter what season they're in. Sure, there's going to be really challenging times in a prep where maybe you're doing a lot of cardio and you don't have as much time, but it should never be like I'm setting aside my whole life. And especially like this is so I'm glad you went and looked at the some of the well-seasoned competitors too, because when we're young and we're seeing like we're just kind of in it, we're really invested in it, we forget that, oh yeah, like I'm also trying to have a family, get married, date. I need to still participate in those activities to create that, so at that point in my life I'm there.
Mhm.
But if we commit so strongly to like an extreme, we're probably missing what's meant for us because we're closed off. And then it was actually likely a safe place for you to date men who were in those extremes, because then you knew predictable for yourself is
It
that
was
you
never.
wouldn't last, and you could expect that they wouldn't appreciate a version of you that you didn't appreciate at that time without being in the other. So I find that really awesome that you shared it, and um it's it's a good it's a good thing to talk about because we put pressure on ourselves, but really if we relieve that pressure, and there's a lot we learn in relationship that can't be learned in singlehood, right? Like
Mhm.
that you learn in relationship with someone. So you don't necessarily need to be perfect, but having that compassion and understanding for yourself and taking the time to know what you want to attract is important. But yes, let's talk about the female competition. So walk me through where that comment was coming from her, and how you make sense of it.
Yeah, and before we do, because you touched on this,
Yeah.
um, some insight that I did gain, and this might be helpful to like a new competitor when I was watching this goes into some of the intentionality that you have to put behind if you really do want to be this singular person. You're gonna have to be inconvenienced to some extent, right? Like I needed to prioritize time for relationships. I needed to have tough conversations with my coaches where due to PTSD, I had a little bit of nervousness about them reacting to my demands and my needs. The third thing, though, was I didn't want to like go into prep again. I didn't want to do 70 minutes on the Stairmaster. I didn't want 1,200 calories. Like, oh, and if you don't want that, then you have to keep it buttoned up in your off season. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. My diet is, I have fun foods occasionally. I have two Pillsbury sugar cookies in my creamy every night. But other than that, it is so clean. I don't miss my steps. I don't, and I find ways to enjoy those, right? Like I'm not super regimented. I don't have to do them on the treadmill. I go outside and I walk around the lake and I feed the swans. I find that happy medium. I have my Ninja Creamy at night with my two Pillsbury cookies. But if you don't want, and as a result, my cardio is at 0. I'm 8 weeks out. My fats are at 80 grams a day. Like I'm eating good. And that's how the pros do it. That's one of the ways that they kind of keep this same even keel identity. It's a lot less stress on the body, and you don't have to like pull yourself down, and you don't feel this need to kind of fluctuate back and forth. Keep it put together. So that's my little 2 cents there.
No, I'm glad that
um,
you shared that. That's so true.
yeah, because I remember, I mean, I did that. I was like, okay, an off season means that I gain 20 pounds. Well, it also means you have to lose 30 when you go into your prep, as opposed to an off season where you gain 5 to 10 and you're only losing that amount over 16 weeks in your next prep. It's a lot different.
And that's not even to say that you have to stay within 5 to 10 pounds though, because I know for me personally, that's never been possible. So I would never tell
Oh, I gained 40 in my 2 years off. So
yeah, like I know it's so much easier to maintain a closer weight to stage weight, but I know so many people put this pressure on themselves like, oh, great, now I'm 8 pounds over and I failed. And so then F it, I'm going to binge. I think what happens when you're referring to buttoning up and keeping it tight, like it's that marriage that you talked about between the two identities. And it's finding how do I exist in a way that supports both goals and both purposes without beating myself up if I go this way or feeling isolated and trapped if I go this way.
well,
And
you know what? When I was drinking and eating all the things and doing Sunday brunch, I may have been having fun, but if I'm being completely honest, when I went to put on my skinny jeans, I was like, oh, these are tight. I didn't really feel my best. And when you sort of realize that you actually want to feel confident in that phase of life and like you want to feel your best, and like we talked about, you do marry those two identities, it's a lot easier to also allow your actions. Like we are self-confirming humans. We are going to confirm our biases, good and bad.
Mhm.
And a good bias to have is that you are Maddie Michelson. You are human. You've got community and friends that support you. You care about being and feeling your best. You care about being healthy. You care about being lively. You care about being, a poster girl for the sport. And that doesn't mean having shredded abs, but that means truly living out a life that you're proud of. And it's a lot easier to keep things, like I said, buttoned up because you don't feel like you're in two different seasons. You're truly being present in this identity. And this identity, me sitting here right now, doesn't feel like I'm deprived of anything. It doesn't feel like I have foods that I can't have right now that I better have when I'm in my off season because they're going to be taken away from me. There is none of that because I truly am convicted and I believe that I am just 1%.
Mhm.
And everything that I have is available to me. Nothing's scarce. Nothing is limited in resources. We're going to go through phases, right, where we have to have a little bit less, but I don't have to take anything out ever because it's just consistent all the way through for me.
Love that.
But
That's beautiful.
in regards to female competition, sorry, I got on a tangent.
No, those are good tangents. I know we
You
want
could
to
have
talk
fast
about
forwarded if
everything.
you wanted to, but you stayed. No, but in regards to female competition, let's talk about that because I think that's something that has been so characteristic in my life, my whole life. So remember, I was a ballet dancer. That's a single person sport, much like bodybuilding is. And it was very much, we were going to the YAGP, I think it was called, Youth American Grand Prix, these big competitions. It was one girl up on stage and you were fighting for a placing. It's much like bodybuilding. And so even though you were taking ballet classes together, right? Even though we're for female athletes, we're all on the same team. I very much saw it as I was the girl on Instagram, like, oh, she's going to beat me. I need to beat her. I need to come in leaner. Like it creating this anxiety and this fear. And I never knew these girls. Like I never knew them from Adam. I never had a conversation with them. And I started thinking like ugly things about them. Like, ugh, like that's my competition. Like, mom, look at her. She's in my height class type of thing. And it doesn't feel good. Um, it doesn't feel good because morally and like ethically, we're all girls and we all worked equally as hard to get there. But something that I really learned, and this is something that being on, a team and having an all-female team, coaching team, has really taught me, especially in this sport, is that at the end of the day, yes, we all did work equally as hard to be up on that stage. Doesn't matter if you're a novice or you're the winner of the Olympia, no one's worked harder. We've all worked to the same degree of hard, right? Even if you've messed up on your diet and you've binged, man, is that a tough pill to have to swallow and to feel that guilt. We've all worked just as hard, just to put that out there. Now, once you get up on stage, I really struggled with this in Irving because I actually had girls on my team coached by the exact same coaches and in my height class. There was like 4 of us. And I remember literally telling my coaches like, "Oh my God, what do you do? Like, is there one of you that like loves one of us more than the other? And so you're like secretly giving us the perfect macros and then the other one gets a little like, what do you do?" And they're like, "What do you mean? Like we do our best for each one of you. It's not up to us." And so I started to dive a little deeper there. And I realized whether I have a conversation with my teammate who I'm up against backstage or not, whether I'm kind to her or whether I'm like, you know, pumping up and looking over my shoulder like, "Oh shit, sure, her glutes look really good. I'm nervous about being up against her." Whether I have that competitive perception with her or of her or not, doesn't change how the judges see her or see me on stage. And this is why you see Jen Dory and Laura Lee are buddy buddy, and Laura Lee and Phoebe are buddy buddy, and Ashley Kay and Laura Lee are buddy buddy. Because at the end of the day, whether you're nice or whether you're a absolute biatch to the girl that you're competing against, it makes no difference when you get up on that stage. And that's when I finally realized like that competitive nature does not serve me. And so instead of doing that, right? Because the judges don't care whether you're friends with your teammate or not, whether you made friends backstage or not. I realized the only person I was hurting was myself, because there's nothing worse than losing, which you do more often than not in this sport. There's nothing worse than losing and leaving a show and feeling so alone.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you could walk away? And this sounds silly, but what if you could walk away with a friend? And in my case, there was one girl in particular. Her name is Shelby Reed.
Uh-huh.
And I was so nervous to go up against her. I was DMing my coaches about her all week. We were on the same team, same coaches. And I had she just won the overall at Sacramento Pro before going to nationals. And I was hell bent and convinced. I'm like, I better not be in her height class. She actually just texted me. I was like, I better not be in her height class because she's going to win this whole thing. And at the show at first, I went in with that competitive mentality, and then I had that flip. And we became friends at the show. And we were backstage talking about fake boobs and all the things. And long story short, she's our new assistant coach. And she is, before she became our assistant coach, she bought a plane ticket. She lives in Arizona to come fly and see me during Valentine's Day before we even talked about working together. And so it's like this beautiful friendship that has came from something that could have never even came to fruition if I didn't see that, like, wow, we could share hurt together. We could share wins together. And one of the coolest things too was that when I had that win and the day for her like did not go as planned for many other reasons aside from winning or not, she celebrated me and she loved on me. And it almost made me feel this like internal sense of guilt because I'd always felt jealous of the girls that won. And instead, like I had to realize that their winning was not a personal thing. It wasn't like they were trying to go up there. Oh, we're all trying to go up there and win. But it's not like they were trying to go up there and make me feel like I was a sore loser. So why should I be nasty towards them for something that they're not in control of, their win? It doesn't help anybody. So celebrate them, lift one another up, because this sport is so much better when you have girls to share with. So
I
that's
just love oh, that was a beautiful speech. I loved everything about that and your ability to share your own maturity through that. And how you grew from having that mentality of competition to one of celebration. And that's something I learned throughout the sport because I used to like my very first show. I remember being backstage and I was like by myself. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know anybody. I didn't have a team. It was none of that. And then as I got further into the sport and connecting with the girls like at athlete meetings or backstage and then this starting this podcast, it was like I started this podcast and I was like, I don't talk to anybody in my life because I was like running an online business and then
Yeah.
I was going to school online. So I was like, well, this podcast will actually help my communication skills a lot more too. And then I started having these beautiful connections and friendships grow from it and through it. And it just like changed so much. And I think a lot of us who have an athletic background might go into it with that competitive spirit.
Mhm.
Like, as a volleyball player, it was like, well, I want to fight for first string. Like, if
Yeah.
someone takes first string over me, then like I have a personal issue with that because I'm supposed to be first
Well, and I
string.
don't want to say any of this either and make anybody feel like they need to feel bad for wanting to win. Like, don't
No,
get me wrong.
what?
My personality profile, competitiveness is right, right up top, front and center. I will always want to win. You should always want to win too. It's how you're going to put your best foot forward. We're all kind of sick and twisted. It's why we do this sport. But at the same time, winning comes in many forms, and winning can mean simply making a new best friend.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds more like what you're saying is want want to win, but that doesn't mean you have to want to beat other people or see other people lose.
Want to win, you don't want to beat them.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
exactly what yeah. It's like I feel like that also just adds so much more to your journey because you make lasting friendships and we're all going through it together. Like when there's drama or when there's something that happens or when we're confused about something or when we need a shoulder to lean on, it's like the girl who gets it or you can call someone up who you've competed with or connected with and you can be like, you're doing this in your business. Like, can
Mhm.
you show me what you've been doing? Or hey, this happened to me. Is this normal? Or, "Oh my gosh, this happened and I have no one I can talk to about it, and I'm worried about being judged for it. Can I tell you?" And then they can support you through it. Like, if you isolate in a sport that's this small and that really crafted meaning among its community, and outside of the community, there's not much you know about it,
Yeah.
like, you're really gonna miss out on so much of the beauty of it, and and also to speak to what you said at the very beginning, if someone is in their little bubble backstage, don't take it personally either.
Yeah, this is true. If you see me backstage and I look like I'm a serial killer, that's why. Try it. You will not regret that. Get in your bubble, girlfriend.
That's so
One of the
funny.
best pieces of advice that I received, I don't even know who I received it from, but I think you do this maybe at the end of your podcast, but this is like
Oh,
what's a
let's
good
hear
piece
it.
of advice for somebody, but I
Yeah.
love it. When you're backstage, only look at all the girls from the neck up
Mm, that's good.
because I think I used to get in my head my coaches. I need one of those like it's easy, simple. What are those buttons? Those little
The
red buttons.
Staples button.
The Staples button. I need one of those that says it's not an ab competition because all my coaches know. I don't know what it is. I'm like, oh, she's got abs. She's gonna win, and I don't have abs like that, and I won shows. So don't think it's about abs. Like it's no, it's not. It's not the abs. But I know that a lot of girls do feel that way. And it's not just the abs, right? A lot of girls will look at their behind and they'll say,
Yeah,
like, oh, they're going to win. I've had that happen with me because I've looked and they're not even in my division. Like they're a
exactly.
wellness
They're
girl
all
or something. So it's like, don't look at their neck up. You're only going to get in your head. You can't change your conditioning in 30 minutes, anyways. So don't freak yourself out about it, right? It's like going in to get your blood drawn and getting there an hour early. No, pull up with 1 minute to spare. Get in, get out.
Yeah.
But don't look down.
Yeah, I love that. That's it. That's really good advice. It kind of removes that mental turmoil you can fall into. And I think the only time, like I used to compare backstage, and now the only time I look at people like neck down pretty much is if I'm checking their suit or their hair or their tan for them.
Yeah.
It's like, that's good. You're looking good. Or your hair, girl, it's sticking up all the
Yeah.
way over here. Let's brush that out. But otherwise, like, yeah, I like that advice. And also, what I learned too from that is sometimes I've been able to identify the overall winner backstage is just that clear. I'm like, yep, that's probably gonna be her. And then it happens. But then there's been times where I can see someone who looks really good, and then it's like, it's not them, or they missed their class, and you're like, where did that person go? What even happened to them? And so why waste your energy on that when you could just be like celebrating what you've accomplished?
Sure. And don't even waste your energy on social media. I remember, I'll name names because I'm one of her, or I consider her one of my close friends now, but Allie V, who
Oh
had a
my
really
gosh.
epic season.
Yes.
She's a fantastic human inside and out. She's
Yes.
just a beautiful person, but I didn't know anything about her when I was going into junior nationals. And I remember telling my coach at the time, if I'm in her height class, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. And she was set to be in my height class.
Uh-huh.
And I remember freaking out. Like I literally went into the show. I was like, yeah, this is stupid. I don't even know why I'm spending the money to do this. Got to the show. I got measured. I got measured in a higher height class I've never been in before. Wasn't even in her class.
Right.
And I freaked out over nothing. And so just because a girl has been in or not been in and you think you're in the clear because you're not against doesn't mean anything.
I love
Don't
that.
even go on
Yeah.
social media.
I used to like my very first show is like, let me look up X weeks out on like hashtag when people would always hashtag like hashtag 3 weeks out or
Yeah.
hashtag the show. Like I used to do that. And now like that's like a red flag to me when it comes to like the mental state of an athlete is like if they're doing that, it's a red flag because I know that can only detract from the journey they're on because instead of actually looking at the things that they can do better to
Mhm.
improve their journey or say, hey, this is a potential way I could sabotage myself. Here's how I will address it. They're too busy spending energy on already confirming their bias that they're going to lose, confirming their
Yep.
bias that they're not good enough.
Yeah, I would always tell people, especially during my last run of shows, well, we're going to do junior nats and then we're going to do junior USAs and then we're going to do junior USA, then junior nats, then we're going to do universe and then we're going to go up to, and I had this whole plan and I hadn't even gotten to the first show yet. And so already I was creating for myself the circumstance in which nothing was going to happen in my favor, which everything happened in my favor, even the losses. But I guess you could say my pro card wasn't going to happen
Right.
at any of those shows.
Yeah. You already created that story and you were
Yep.
telling every
The
single
narrative had already been set.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Like if I'm planning a show, like I try not to say that then I'm going to do this show and then I'm going to do this one because especially if it's a national show, it's like let me just assume the best and then see how my body responds or see what the feedback is and then decide.
Sure.
So I want to go back to something that we had talked a little bit about but let me see where I want to pick up specifically on that.
Yeah.
It's more so about your eating disorder that you had.
Yeah.
You said it wasn't about body, but then there was a time throughout your prep where you were starting to fixate on your lower belly pooch and like getting obsessive over it. When it wasn't about your body, because maybe bodybuilding brought out some of those types of fixations, but when it was strictly just for control, what did you lose control over in your life? And how did it end up manifesting into disordered eating? Like, what did food and your approach to food look like before to then now?
Oh, so I was fully eating intuitively before my eating disorder. And I was Cody Thompson, my college boyfriend. He was actually my orientation leader. He's a great guy, lovely human, but very much needed a caretaker. And in college, I had zero girlfriends,
Mhm.
zero. And I had like a bad apartment situation. I lived with him in the fraternity house for a year. ATO became AT home.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was house mom, literally. I had my own room. aside from his room, corner to corner, and was the mattress, like literally in a shoebox. And the room was called a casting couch. It was the, I will always tell my kids this. Uh, I will tell my kids this story someday. But anyways, he was my orientation leader. We dated for 3.5 years. I was very much mama. I cooked every meal for him. I did his laundry. I paid his rent and my own. I was on top of his appointments, his homework assignments. And one day I woke up, he had graduated, and I was getting ready to graduate because I graduated in like 2.5 years from college. And I was getting ready to move home, and we were from the same hometown. Didn't know that, but we were. And I was like, hey, I'm done. Like, really done. Like, we've just been a crutch for one another. You were a crutch for me because I had no one else in college. You got me through college because I hated it. And I got you through because I was mom. And when I no longer had him, that was like my baby, essentially. Like, it was something I took all my control out over. So when him and I were dating, I got really into running. And I had been running like 5, 6 miles 5 or 6 days a week. Now the difference was when I was first running, we would get done with our run and we would go to Smoothie King, and I would get a yogurt delight, and it's basically frozen yogurt, sugar coated strawberries, and I would get an extra extra large, like this big, and I would slurp that sucker down in like 5 minutes. Well, I needed it because I just ran 5 and 6 miles.
Mhm.
But then once I didn't have him, the yogurt delights went away. I no longer had a chauffeur for my scooter, so I couldn't go because I was afraid to ride it. Everyone rides scooters in Gainesville.
Uh-huh.
um and yeah, the control just really took it out on food. I started using measuring like spoons. I remember for lunch I used to have a yogurt with granola, an apple, and Whole Foods honey roasted peanut butter. And I used to just heaping scoops of that, probably like 6 tablespoons at a time. Granola, half a cup. Like, I'm not kidding, I really ate. And I started really measuring it. And then after the measurements came the food scale. And
Mhm.
then from there, it just downward spiraled.
How do you classify it as different when you look at it from a mental or intentional standpoint from bodybuilding?
Oh, yes. Well, I think it was a lot about, like I said, like, I'm big, especially in my coaching practice, on educating behind the why. Like, why are we adding carbs? What are carbs really doing to our bodies? Because I am a firm believer that anxiety in all forms, all anxiety is energy. So instead of allowing that energy to kind of paralyze us, right? And like, I don't want to eat more. I don't want to, like, you know, measure out more rice or have that much, because now I knew the size of stuff, because I knew what a food scale was. I knew how to use it. So when I was being told to eat more, I knew that differential was a lot. And so it really helped me to understand the why behind things. Um and to understand how it was working in my body. Like, I was always like interested in understanding things. And so I dove into research and how it was going to help me. And then I think the second thing is too, so I talked about anxiety, leveraging that anxiety for something beneficial. If all it is energy, and this is no matter what the anxiety is caused by, invest that energy into understanding the why, right? Invest that energy into working out or speaking kindly to yourself. And then the other thing too is I had to really look into, remember our digging. I had to dig and find out, why am I having anxiety about this? Why am I feeling anxious? Um, and anxiety, 9 times out of 10, comes from a fear, a past experience that has no leverage in the future and the present, um, or like fictitious things, like things that haven't really even came to fruition and may not, but you're just worried they might.
Mhm.
And nothing about that is concrete. Nothing about that is finite. nothing about that is like here in the moment, in the present. And so I had to also realize that, like, while I did have fear and anxiety about it, it didn't mean that any of the things that I was actually anxious about happening were truly going to happen. I was just creating those circumstances in that narrative in my head. I'm
Mhm.
not really going to get fat from having 20 more grams of carbs. I just felt that carbs make you fat, but I had no sound logic behind that. So it's important, like, for you to also dive into, where is the anxiety coming from? Usually it's going to come from something that's not even really real.
Absolutely. Just like if you have that anxiety about, oh, I'm gonna blow up or I'm gonna have the same struggle, reverse dieting approach, like you'll work that story up so much in your head that then when it comes, you'll be so scared that it can actually manifest in your behaviors and change how you approach things, where then you might try to have too tight of a grip. You might try to have too much control. And then that's when you end up sometimes spiraling. And a lot of the times we convince ourselves of the things that are like shortcuts in our brain. Like it's a shortcut to think that the carb is the reason we gain fat, instead of thinking it's like how much and what else was happening in life and well, how much,
Right.
what were your other choices. Like we just create a shortcut because it's a having one association is a much easier road to go down than trying to piece the whole puzzle together. So I generally think that, like you said, anxiety is building upon a story we're telling ourselves, but it actually is helpful to identify the evidence that supports that and doesn't support that. Because then, if there is evidence that supports it, you can come up with solutions to overcome it, just like you experienced when you had the freebie or the 800 additional calories. And then if there is evidence that does not support it, you're able to say, "Oh, wait, I have nothing to worry about."
It's a tool. It's a tool I use with my clients. I call it the T chart. And on one side of the T, you write down all that is factual. And on the other side, you write down all that is fictitious. And then you work
Mhm.
your way through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how you actually can separate yourself from the problem versus it staying in your head. It's a cognitive behavioral technique, and it's meant to highlight where there's distorted thinking so that way you can actually bring yourself to a reality standpoint and also determine what's going to best serve you and suit you. If the fear is genuine and real, then there's levels of distress we can learn to tolerate to reduce that fear, or to, especially if you have to be exposed to it.
For sure.
So now that you have your pro card, do you feel that that was the thing that signified your success?
Success in,
Overcoming an eating disorder?
no, no. I think in my head, that was kind of like that's what I saw as signifying it. I knew all along that I was going to get that pro card, and outside of 48 hours, I was going to be like, okay, now what's next? Because that's how I'm wired.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I mean, I think that I realized long before I had the pro card that I had healed. But the way that my brain is wired is very much like, I will grab onto something, and I grabbed onto that pro card as the thing that had to signify it. So I didn't stop, but I'm glad I didn't stop, because had I actually given up when I realized that I had already overcame the eating disorder, then I actually would have never realized that I love the sport. And I might not have chosen a lifelong career as a coach of other women because of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your business. Did you ever expect to become a coach after you went to school for nursing?
Well, yes and no. My dream job was actually always to deliver babies. So that kind of turned into getting certified as like a pre and postnatal coach, in which in December alone, I had the news that we have 15 pregnancies on our team. I'm like, am I a prep coach or a pre and postnatal coach? But I'm both.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's been really cool to walk through that season of life with our athletes. But no, so really, in I didn't internalize that I was going where the river was flowing when it was happening to me. But when I was going through my eating disorder, and I had lost my cycle for 2.5 years, and my hair was this thick blonde, not natural, but this thick blonde hair falling out all over the place. My mom was picking it up in clumps and saying, like, look at this, Madison, you need help. Your hair, I can't keep up with it around the house. My thyroid I was going to be put on levothyroxine and Synthroid, and I was on Wellbutrin and Xanax for depression. They wanted to put me on ADHD medication because I couldn't focus because my cognitive function was declining. On top of birth control, they wanted to give me a progesterone push. I was on prescription strength stool softeners because I wasn't having all these things. I ended up even getting kidney stones. And I realized, like, there's got to be a better approach. There has to be something. I was getting side effects from being on the meds. And that's when I delve into the world of functional nutrition. Now, how I kind of coach my athletes now is I don't label everybody as having a functional issue. I hate that because I grew up with that. I grew up with doctors that I went to see, and they were functional practitioners, and they would find something because they made income doing it. And their belief truly is that everybody could be optimized. Now, I also see a lot of, sorry, my nose ring was sticking out. I wasn't picking my nose, but I also see a lot of like athletes in teams and whatnot. There's this like prevalence when I started opening up about my journey and my healing and what I did, which led me through functional nutrition. And then I took a 4-year board certification course to become a board certified FNTP. A lot of athletes started coming to me and they're like, hey, I have gut issues, or I was on a meal plan and now I have these food intolerances, or girl, I haven't got a period in 3 years, or girl, they want to put me on thyroid meds now because my thyroid's downregulated. I'm like, this sport, if you don't have a functional background, I see a lot of coaches run girls into the ground because they kind of go in with that they either don't know what they don't know, right? So they're doing the best that they can do, but they're not taking the right precautions and safeguarding their athletes. Or B, they are really focused on, this athlete has so much potential, I'm going to get him to the stage at whatever cost. This athlete's going to go for it. And we kind of forget about the fact that we still want to be a woman and feel like a woman and be healthy on the other side. And so I was like, man, I really could help other people with this because of what I've been through, like very much using my pain, if you will, as my purpose. And so I acquired 2 functional doctors on my team. We have 2 registered dietitians who work with competitors. And we have now taken girls to the stage, through the stage, beyond the stage, through seasons of life, pregnancy, going into preps again, menopause, prepping, just all the things. And they're feeling their best, and they're off medications if they want to be. And, if they need HRT, like we even have a clinic. So it's one of those things where if they don't want to go on it, we don't have to put them on it. Like, it's just being able to empower these women in such a way where they can truly learn so much about their internal body, and they can actually, my main mission is to promote longevity in this sport. And I see so many athletes, especially the ones that you'll see, like, mark my words, look at some of those athletes that you're like, damn, she looks good. See if she's still in the sport in 5 years. It's not because you can't look your best and still have a good internal system, but there's been a lot of turnover of some really insane, beautiful athletes because they don't know that there is another approach to going about all of this.
So true. I feel like every day I see some jaded competitor online bashing competing, and I'm always like, the answer is in the question. Like, they're breaking down the process that they went through to get on stage, and I'm like, that is why
Yeah.
you're feeling this way. It's not because competing is to blame. It's because of the approach you took to get there, or not taking responsibility for the mental side of things that needed to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really cool what you've built, actually. I want to hear a bit more about it. You have a bunch of different people on your team. So you've got functional medicine doctors, you have dietitian. How does it work when someone signs on as a client with you? Are they, maybe this is too much information, but are they paying you to coach them, or do they pay you and they get access to the whole team? Like how does that work? If you're looking for competition heels, jewelry, and fun competitor extras, then visit shoefairyofficial.com and use code Celeste for a discount at checkout.
Yeah, so these are actually the doctors that I used for myself. And I did a 2-year mentorship program with them as well. So I've been kind of grandfathered in. And so they have a particular relationship with our team where we can bring athletes to them. It's free of charge. So this covers, we can order labs, we can review their labs with actual doctors, because I think a lot of coaches review labs, but they have no means to do it. And that's when things can kind of get dicey. Like, I don't even look at my clients' labs. I bring my labs into my doctors as case studies. But to answer your question, my athletes always work directly with me. So I'm their coach. I'm the one that they get to see and speak to, and I'm doing all of the prep protocols. But if we have functional things that come up, or we just want to do, precautionary preventative things, we can leverage them as well. So they do all of our supplement protocols. All of our athletes get a mock example meal plan when they first onboard with us. That's based off of their favorite foods, when they like to eat, how often they like to eat, allergies, and it's just a skeleton that they can follow if they want to. But that's created by our registered dietitians in the spirit of being legal. And yeah, they work with me. So I do all of the show selection with them, and suit selection, and hair and tan and makeup and posing, and they get access to our app and our workouts and check-ins and all the nitty-gritty. But they're also going to have that functional support too.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you've partnered with those professionals so then you can provide those services to the clients.
Yeah.
Nice.
And to do
Oh,
so at cost, because cost being free, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of things are outsourced, and I know that it's a huge financial burden. I outsourced, stuff for the longest time, and it's $600 sometimes just for the medication in the labs, or the labs alone.
right. Yeah, that's why I was wondering. I'm like, how are you making money?
Yeah.
So it
Well,
sounds like it's relationship.
yeah.
That's awesome. So you've developed a relationship with them. So then when clients hire you, they're essentially hiring your team too.
Yeah.
And you're paying, or you've worked out something with your team.
Yeah.
Nice. That's really cool. I like that model.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's not usual. So it's cool that you have that. So you launched your coaching business. That was essentially like you did go to school and your original goal was to become you wanted to deliver babies. And then now you're here and you're coaching, and you also provide so much education on YouTube and Instagram. How much does your own education play a role in the work that you do?
The functional knowledge. So I
Yeah, like
actually,
what you went to school for and everything.
not my schooling at all. But the functional knowledge, the board certification, I did a DNP, and then I did a FNTP, functional nutritional therapy practitioner program. Um, and then I did A4M, which is like, typically only medical professionals can get into that. But there's a hormone program, there's a peptide program, there's a weight loss program. But I actually worked at an HRT clinic for 2 years. So I was kind of grandfathered in there as well. So it's really those certs. They were years and years long, but those certs that I think helped me the most. And then experience, nothing speaks more than working actually one-on-one with the clients.
So true. Totally understand that. You can read a book and then you can sit in a counseling room with someone and be like,
Way different.
well, let me see. Let me teach you about this theory. That's certainly not how it ever goes.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, I understand that and I respect that. I think getting education, honoring those who have education is awesome, and highlighting your education is super cool because you've obviously spent a lot of time in it and also you're experienced. Something I did want to harness your education and experience for is what you think some of the biggest things people miss focusing on that would actually make them more successful as a competitor if they did.
Number one thing, gut issues, bloating, distension, digestive issues. 90% of your hormones are synthesized in your gut. So if you've got a gut imbalance, if foods don't sit well with you, if you've got the girly probs where you don't poop for 4 days, you likely have a hormonal imbalance. So that just means that your thyroid is probably suffering a little bit. Your sex hormones are probably suffering a little bit. And if those aren't optimized, you're just going to have to push harder.
How do you optimize someone's gut health or even identify that there's a problem?
That's a great question. So I actually start with a very much less is more approach. I have girls who are like, I want a GI map right now. And I'm like, let's just spend 4 weeks going through your diet. Let's just spend 4 weeks assessing stress. Like I said, I'm not somebody who's like, where's your functional issue? Right. I like to first see like, what can we just do with what we have? When I have a client who comes to me with a clear hormonal, or they're hell bent and convinced that they have a hormonal imbalance, I'm like, let's just spend 6 weeks doing what I call a DNC, like a dusting and a cleaning. Let's just clean the slate. Let's get stress managed. Let's get on a solid meal timing routine. Let's get macros distributed evenly. Let's change the distribution of your macros. Let's reduce cardio, whatever it may be. And let's start to build some momentum here, and then we'll check labs, because the labs that we get back right now, you're not going to be happy with them. But there's a lot that you can do. Remember, this is functional nutrition. Functional nutrition is not giving somebody a slew of supplements and probiotics and making them spend money out the wazoo to have a problem that they could halfway solve just by focusing on the basics.
Hmm. Are some of those basics, like when you say macro distribution and meal timing, are you talking about like consistently eating at the same time and how people are combining their foods?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, functional nutrition is obviously not something that you can like put you can define it, but a lot of it has to do with, 90% of people are consuming. And this, I hate to even say this because it makes it seem very much like a blanket thing,
Yeah.
but I'll go through people's diets, and they start their day with an Alani New energy drink and a protein bar, and then they get done with the gym and they're going to have a Fairlife protein shake and a box of Apple Jacks. And then at dinner, they're having a box of Easy Mac, or a thing of Easy Protein Mac, right? Muscle Mac. And then they're going to have some ground turkey mixed in there. And then before bed, they're going to have a package of oatmeal with sugar-free maple syrup. And like, that kind of goes back to an approach that I once took. It was very much if it fits your macros, but 90% of those things were inflaming my gut. 90% of those things, my body was not breaking down as efficiently as it could. Just more whole food sources. Doesn't mean you can't have your oatmeal with your maple syrup, but eat some real maple syrup, like things like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also a interesting approach when you're talking about maybe a diet that requires some level of restriction. And I'm not talking about restriction in like a negative sense. I'm talking about if you're cutting for a show, then it can be more appealing to incorporate foods that are like the low carb, the low fat, the sugar free. But how does that actually work against competitors if done to an extreme?
Well, I think a lot of that just has to do with the body's inability to break those things down. Like a general rule of thumb is like if you can't pronounce it, you should not be having it in a prep.
Hmm.
Even things like a lot of times girls will still have like whey protein, and the body really, really struggles to break that down. Now, I will say when your gut is healed, a lot of girls will suffer from what we call leaky gut. And I hate talking about this subject because I think that sometimes people hear like, oh yeah, everyone has leaky gut, or oh, I have SIBO, I have SIBO. Like we just throw that out. No, you don't. But let's just say that you've had bloating for a long time, right? And you're bloated no matter what you eat, no matter what time of day. Might be worth looking into confirming or not confirming leaky gut, which is when these tight junctions in your intestinal lining become loose and the bacteria seeps out. Well, if you're consuming these artificial sweeteners, it causes inflammation in your gut as well. So not only now are you dealing with like the bloating because your body can't break it down as easily, but you're also dealing with inflammation in your gut, slower motility, things like that. Now, if you have tight junctions in your gut lining and your gut is nice and healthy, then sure, you could probably have a protein bar every couple days and handle it just fine. So it also has to do with if you're in good health when you're having those things.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I was talking to one of the coaches for the coaches series about how it seems like in the industry when something has a light shined on it, suddenly everybody shines light on it,
Mhm.
and it like creates this storm of everyone has a problem or issue with it. Um at one point it was adrenal fatigue, and then it
Oh, yeah.
was the gut
You're not
issues.
suffering from adrenal burnout. You're just drinking 800 milligrams of caffeine a day.
Correct. Yeah, literally that. Like, no wonder you have no ability to feel that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you're
Yeah.
tanked.
You haven't
Um,
taken a deload week in 8 weeks. Or, like, come on, girl.
yeah, we
But it
complicate
feels
things.
good. It feels good to have a label on when you're feeling a certain way. Right. We talked about those shortcuts.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I made a video about diagnostics in mental health and self-diagnosing.
Mhm.
And some of the comments I got on that on YouTube were just like, I could tell that people were upset about the statements I made, but in reality, like some people would rather have a label than have a solution. And that's just the unfortunate, dangerous side of it. Or we could, I don't know, I don't need to repeat everything said, but you're right. It's like, it's easier to slap a label on it and say, well, now I know, than to actually look at the basics and say, well, maybe this is contributing to the symptom. It's not the
Right.
problem.
Right.
So, something that you wrote about in a post was how much this prep changed compared to the last one. And we talked a little bit about that, feeling emotions, making friends, resting, trying different approaches. Um, why do you think those things made a difference in you becoming an IFBB pro? And how do you intend to apply them in your career?
Well, I think I kind of touched on how I think they made a difference in me becoming an IFBB pro. It was like I realized that this didn't need to be hard. I didn't need to suffer to get there. I didn't need to suffer in isolation. I didn't need to punish my body. Um, I didn't need to feel like I was wearing two different identities. And in furthering, in my IFBB career, I think it's more so just about like, okay, now that I've had these lessons, now it's not no longer the dress rehearsal. That's what the pro card was. Now it's I get to be, I'm not gonna lie, getting my pro card and winning that overall, it put a magnifying glass in many ways on me. And I see that as a beautiful opportunity, like I said, to share my story. Like one of the things that I'm humbled and so grateful to receive as a DM from people all the time is like, wow, I just appreciate your transparency. And if you're watching this, like I really want people to know that I will never be anything but absolutely real, always. And I want that to be so heard and so seen in and through my content, is that like Maddie is Maddie. Like you see her in person, she's the exact same person that she is on YouTube.
Definitely. That authenticity is so important because I'm sure you can attest to the fact that you can meet people who actually are very different in person. then you expect them to be based on their online personality. And that's a weird, that's why they say don't meet your heroes, right? But it's nice when you can actually be who people expect you to be. Um,
Yeah.
and there's no surprises there. And I agree, like your realness is one of your greatest attributes. You're able to bring that and show people that's okay to talk about the things that, hey, it's not easy to admit that at one point you were having a competitive mindset with other women, or that you got in a relationship that was like your control mechanism. And
Mhm.
none of those things are necessarily always the glamorous thing to share, but out of respect to the athlete you are today, you recognize that that was part of you becoming who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to this day, I tell girls on discovery calls, I will never take someone on if I haven't either been through the fire already
Mm.
or if I haven't coached someone through that very fire. And I will gladly refer them out to another qualified coach. And so I mean, I've had quite a few experiences at this point in my young age of life, but I don't regret any of them, good and bad,
How old
because
are you?
I'm actually 25.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
24. I'll be 25 in June. So not 25. It's January.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you've built something really amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's awesome. I remember like growing in my business and everything, I started with that mentality too. Like, I won't take on anybody that I haven't been able to work through that. And then as I got more educated and more experienced, it was like, wow, like I can help even more people. But you do, when you set that boundary, it also is like very good because it's protecting them and yourself.
For sure. For sure. And it's not to say I won't take on a menopausal client, right? But I added the caveat of that I haven't coached somebody through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Well, I would love to get, I know you shared your advice already, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that for advice for someone on their road to pro or someone who's never competed before.
I honestly think that one of the best things that you can do on this journey is someone on their road to pro or a novice. Like, which one do I pick?
Do both. Do both. I just didn't know
Okay.
if your
Okay.
previous advice of not looking past was for one in particular.
Okay. Oh, I have to pee so bad. I'm feeling so anxious. I'm getting hot right now. Okay. So, someone who's a novice, literally, if you have never competed before, go into that show. And I know everybody says this, you're going to smack me across the face. Freaking have fun. Have fun, because your first show is going to be filled with flops and boofs and oops. And if you're going into that show and you're only fixated on every little thing that like doesn't like go right, like pay for your makeup, pay for your tan, pay for the best freaking competition suit. All your hard work is like bask in the moment of show day. That's my advice for a true novice, because I did that and I don't regret that first show walking up on stage at 90 pounds for 1 second, because I felt like a damn queen. And if you're on your road to pro, um, mm, don't forget to be grateful, because you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, and gratitude does not just mean being grateful for the people around you, but don't forget to be grateful for that one vessel that you have that you never get to trade. And that is this. And this is what's providing for you. And this is what's carrying you to that stage to get that pro card. So show it love, speak kindly to yourself, and bring others on your journey. Be kind to the others around you too.
Love that. That's great advice. So, how can people connect with you and work with you and follow you and your journey?
Yeah. So I don't know if we'll have an application down here.
Yes, there'll be links and everything.
Okay, so there's a link for an application. If it's not down below, it's in my Instagram bio. You just fill that brief application out. We set up a one-on-one 45-minute discovery call, get to talk with one another. And that's for lifestyle and contest prep coaching. You can work with myself or our assistant coach, Shelby. And my Instagram is Mads, MADS, Michie, MICHIE Fitness. And YouTube's the same, all the same handles.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes page. So you guys, that's on celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening right away, it's at the top of the episode page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section and you'll be able to find it there. Not only will it be links to connect, but you'll also see a full summary of the episode in like a written form. You'll see one in a bulleted topics list, and you'll see episode timestamps so you can go back and listen to your favorite part or share certain things that resonated with you with somebody else. It means so much to the athletes when you reach out to them or when you message them or you tag us in your stories. That goes so far, and it means a lot to me because I've been working so hard on this podcast for years, and the love, I never get tired of it. So I appreciate you guys listening and supporting the show. And Maddie, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hope y'all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you're in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.